Last week, we finally made it to Norfolk, Virginia, and got started on the Intracoastal Waterway. We enjoyed a break from winter in the North Atlantic Ocean as we motored through the calm, flat waters and enjoyed beautiful sunsets for the next 166 nautical miles on our journey south. But after arriving in Morehead City, North Carolina, we were disappointed at the weather forecasts. The same ones that constantly plagued us on the way down continued to follow us. But we layered up in our warmest clothing and tried to catch a small window for a jump outside the waterways to Charleston, South Carolina. Yet another failed attempt as we ended up darting back inside one of the small inlets to continue with more motoring on the ICW. We left Morehead City in North Carolina bound for Charleston, excited to get the sails up again to quiet the loud hum that leaves you vibrating after motoring all day long. But the weather had other ideas, and with strong following seas that our autopilot couldn't keep up with, we were left hand steering. And it seemed that our trip to Charleston would require all hand steering, so instead, we found an inlet to get back to the Intracoastal Waterway and continued our motoring. We had a bit of a drone catching incident the other day. I did catch it on the second try, but it didn't shut off for some reason. Normally you grab it and you flip it upside down and the drone shuts off, and then
chicken mode.
You can, apparently it's called chicken mode. But it didn't work, so I'm holding it upside down and it's flying as fast as it can to get out of my hand while John's working out how to shut it off from the remote control, and trying to control it, I stupidly reached in to grab it, and I managed to slice my finger open pretty good. So just playing a bit of first aid today and cleaning it out again and putting a new bandage on it. It's not as deep as it looks, it just looks gross because it's been wrapped up for a couple of days. But oh well, another finger injury. Happy to be motoring on the calm waters inland, it turned out not to be all stress-free. The area, visibly affected by the recent Hurricane Florence, still had uncharted changes from the storm, and we managed to run aground on 2 separate occasions. Once the morning after a full moon, on a king high tide, with no hope of a higher tide arriving to help us get off the ground. But John's strategic steering, once we touched bottom, learned from conversations with our friend Ed in Rhode Island, got us back into deeper waters and playing with the dolphins in no time with minimal damage. Our only concern being our engine, which we thought may have a clogged heat exchange from where the seawater intake was a bit too near the bottom. We cleaned our heat exchange where we had anchored in Carolina Beach, North Carolina, using some more creative thinking to make the tools we needed, and took advantage of another bad weather window to rest for a couple of days. We even braved the city streets, in some places still underwater almost to our knees, to get our laundry done, before continuing our trek out of the United States. The voyage continued with a stop in Charleston to refuel and pick up some mail that we had sent ahead of us, before quickly continuing on to Port Canaveral. The trip to Port Canaveral from Charleston was over 382 nautical miles and was almost entirely filled with heavy rain, rough confused seas, seasickness, strong winds, and storms at night with lightning so bright you couldn't keep your night vision to steer the boat comfortably. We thought it was almost over as we neared Cape Canaveral, exhausted, but we happened to be passing by during a rocket launch and had to stay well offshore for safety before turning into Port Canaveral, adding an extra 8 hours to the trip of hand steering. But we did get to see the Tesla SpaceX launch and attempted landing from one of the closest vantage points possible. If only we could have caught it on film more clearly. All of the storms took a toll on our sails and solar panels, with some of the bolts connecting the panels to our bimini tearing out in the strong winds, and the panels needing to be resecured with lines. Not to mention the various tears in our mainsail requiring mending and the loss of our sail batten.
So,
Oh, you always start with so.
I thought that as I said it. I was like, why did you just say so? You never say so. Why did you say so?
Maybe because you're sewing.
Yes. S-E-W, not S-O. Yesterday, off Cape Canaveral, we got into a bit of a blow and yet again managed to tear our lovely old mainsail. So we're just going around and we're stitching it up. Tore a big corner out here right near the batten, and also tore the batten pocket open, and we actually lost a batten because the screw came out the end of where it locks it in, came right out the end, and we lost a batten, which is really unfortunate. So what I'm doing is I'm just going around and I'm sewing in a patch over the torn section, and what I've done is I've taken off the luff tape there, and I'm going to sew this patch underneath, and then I'm going to sew this luff tape back down over top so that the patch is strong. And I've put a bit of Dacron, cut that out, and I've put a bit of Dacron on both sides, so sandwich it, and I'm going to go around the outside once, and once I've gone around the outside I'm just going to do 2 diagonals through the center, and that should hold that nice and tight, fingers crossed. Then once I've sewn this patch on, then what I'm going to do is trim this up, make this shorter, and I'm going to sew this section of the batten pocket to another section and just replace this bit here, this section along there, and that should mean that this is all secure. Now when I put when I cut the new piece of batten pocket to go over top of this, what I'm going to do is make sure that it sits over top of this one, so as we slide our batten in, it doesn't get caught in between these 2 sections here. But for now, we'll focus on this little repair. Then once we've done that, we get to sew on new sail slides, because we managed to break 11 sail slides, which is extraordinary, which is, they seem to just be the old ones. We replaced some in New York, and as the old ones broke, it just broke more of the old ones. So I think now we're going to have all new sail slides, which means that hopefully they won't break again. Fingers crossed. Also, we might try and take a reef a little bit sooner. I think it was gusting up to like 25, 30, steady winds of 22, 25, something like that. And we still had a full main out, so probably need to take a reef a little bit earlier, and that will prevent further damage to our mainsail. But at this moment, we just want to get it through so we can jump across and go to the Bahamas. So close, yet so far.
Our last stop south was a jump to Fort Pierce, Florida, where we would wait until the northerly winds passed to safely cross the Gulf Stream to the Bahamas. Our 70 nautical mile sail left us arriving at Fort Pierce at sunset after a great sail while trolling for fish, 4 of which we caught and 1 of which my terrible gapping skills managed to pull aboard. was a delicious meal to celebrate our first catch and an easy passage. We stayed in Fort Pierce for 6 days, needing a bit of a pick-me-up after a strenuous 5 weeks down the east coast of the U.S. And we got just the thing when our surrogate Rhode Island granddad came to town. We spent a wonderful day with him, and it was exactly what we needed to get back on track. Check out next week as we prepare ourselves for our first ever arrival to a new country under sail, taking the brief period of safe winds to pass through the infamous Gulf Stream that separated us and the Bahamas. And watch as we finally get to enjoy the sights in paradise, including getting in the water for the first time since we left Rhode Island.